Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Monday. Here with another live session with Bryan Ossa talking about pricing strategies today. How you doing, man?
What's up? I'm doing fantastic. And yeah, really excited to kind of wrap up this whole segment on pricing because I know it's been a bit of it's been a hot topic. And even in the conversations that aren't on these live sessions, this is something that comes up as a question quite frequently. So I am I've had a lot of fun talking about this, and I'm really excited to kind of wrap all this up and start transitioning from the theory of into here's how to actually build this stuff out.
Yeah. And I think this is one of those places where it's pretty easy to find that spot where, they think they might have a strategy, but there really is no strategy and it's been based on a number of factors. So talking about that, finishing up value-based and pricing, or project-based pricing today. We're gonna keep it theory focused.
hmm
Maybe we show some high-level stuff, but with the goal of coming back, after inbound, I feel a lot of, you know, it always provides a lot of energy, positive energy. So coming back with this show in a couple weeks after Brian's break to really bring that all into like tangible state inside of HubSpot and really build some cool stuff when we get back.
Exactly. Yeah, and I couldn't have said it better myself. So it's really great to have the conversation that we are having in the timeline that we're having it now because again, to your point, there's a lot that's going to be coming out here shortly, and being able to talk about this idea and then showing here's how to implement it once we have these new tools and features available to us, which we have speculation is coming, but we don't actually know what that is. And we won't know until after inbound next week. And I won't be able to talk about it because, to your point, doing the holidays, I'll be available. I'll be, spending time with family for the next couple of weeks. Uh,
Yes. No, and,
so,
and you deserve it.
oh
And
yeah.
um, yeah, I think these kinds of discussions, specifically pricing strategy, I think the team at HubSpot, because I relate this a lot to what I like to focus on, it's quote to cash optimization and this whole commerce piece as it's been brought in, and really this full circle, like even orders as they come in, like
hmm
how are we getting all the information into HubSpot in a strategic way so that all these new tools that we're supposed to be taking advantage of, like sales workspace and AI prospecting tools,
hmm
and if we don't have a pricing strategy in place, there's always a huge disconnect to where, okay, so this stuff is great and it helps us scale, but what happens when we get to the next version of that company we've already sold to,
hmm
and their last engagement they had a certain kind of price, and you just start to, as soon as you try to rapidly scale, all the things that you were able to like curate and manage yourself during the individual sales process, special pricing here,
hmm
special free offer over here, you can't run from that stuff. It doesn't scale well, but there is opportunity with a tool like HubSpot to build it into the process, right? Where
Exactly.
that stuff can inform all of your front end, strategy. And that's the thing I think and I hope, and I mention this to, PMs all the time with these new tools. Like we've got to find a way to bring in stuff like pricing and product history and what
hmm
has our relationship truly been with these organizations that we're trying to resell, upsell, cross sell. Pricing strategy plays into that in a big, big way.
hmm Exactly. And that that's kind of the big part of value-based pricing and what we've been talking about there because your your summary there really hit these last two topics that we're focusing on. And those topics are project-based and value-based pricing. And to just give a little bit of an introduction and a recap, in the previous conversations, we talked about a variety of other different pricing models, everything from cost plus pricing to competition based pricing, all the way down to hourly and time-based pricing. Today's focus being on the project and the value is a lot more focused on the actual output and end product, not necessarily as much about what you want to do in terms of like adding a markup or what you're valuing your time at or benchmarks across other people. It's really what is the thing that you're doing and what is that perceived value and benefit that the end user is going to be getting. And then you're able to turn all that together in order to build these two different kinds of models. And it very bluntly, project and value-based pricing, I kind of categorize in the same bucket. Technically, in the traditional sense, they're very different. So project-based pricing is effectively the opposite of hourly pricing. So hourly pricing is the concept of you have a number that you charge by the hour, and based off of that, that gives you the amount that you're going to be asking your customer to pay. Project-based is effectively you take the number of what you think this overall project and everything holistically is going to cost, and you pitch that. This tends to be extremely common in things like doing HubSpot onboardings or offering market like individual like marketing audits or website rebuilds and things of those nature that very much have a very clear start and end date. Value-based pricing, on the other hand, is everything we're talking about in terms of building out your products and services based off of what your customer is willing to pay. And so we've been talking about this a lot on the show in, if you are able to generate a social calendar, for example, like graphics plus text and posting it, and you can do that maybe you build the whole calendar for a client out in 2 hours, but the client's valuing that at maybe $500 and your hourly rate's $75 an hour, that's where the value-based pricing comes in, because you then have that 150 to that 500, that $350 gap is that additional net profit that you're able to take because that value that you're providing to your client.
Yeah.
And it's just that in theory. And that's a huge structure of what falls around retainer-based structures in marketing agencies and consultancies. You have this monthly rate that's being charged, whether that's 2, 3, 10, or 20,000 a month, and all of that's based off of what the value that you're able to provide your clients.
Yeah.
And
I think the project, it's interesting like how you describe it. I know that's the intent. And it can be the bridge between, hourly cost based, like the other things we talked about, and value based. What's interesting is people, when you see these projects, and I think the reason it can get confusing is you see these project based, or we talk about it as if it's a project, but then all the cost is 100% related to the hours that it takes to get the project done. And that's where project for me is more of you see it, at least in practice, go both ways. And where it goes the other way is if you've done that project 10 times and you've refined the process so it no longer takes you, that amount of time, but it's still providing the same amount of value, like you don't have to price it cheaper, right? And the easiest, what should be the easiest, like the important piece is that the sales conversation has to switch, right? It's like, what are you trying to accomplish in terms of value for the business? And this is why I always say, like, if we're worried about budgets, if we're gonna budget focused, I can't afford HubSpot conversation, we're in a really bad place, because often the goals that the company's investing in something like HubSpot to achieve goals of growth that are millions of dollars, and we're talking thousands a month. for HubSpot. And that should help. Like if your goal is $5 million of growth, and I can do this, website for you, or, HubSpot implementation, customized build out, and, all these various projects, and then maybe there's an ongoing relationship, right? How much, like if we guaranteed the 5 million, which is hard to do, but this kind of it's the pricing conversation, the selling conversation that you
Hmm.
might be having. Would that be worth, like, would you pay $100,000 to guarantee 5 million in growth? Right? Getting
Exactly.
to places like that and then creating like some steps to say, look, we proved this piece of the process, right? Now we get into the retainer, which is like, hey, if I'm here side by side with you, like we're gonna get to the 5 million.
Hmm.
Then, that's not a $500 a month retainer, right? You should be willing to pay. And that's why, you hear about some pretty big dollar amounts with the best of the best. Like they get that, and a lot of times there's money back guarantees from some of them. Like that's how good they are. And like when you can confirm at that point, like this is the goal we're trying to achieve together, value-based pricing becomes a lot easier than most people think.
Exactly. And you you can look at this in a variety of different terms. And a conversation I just had actually over the weekend actually uses the concept of value-based pricing and translates it to conferences. And we have inbound next week. And an average ticket to inbound is between $1,000 and $2,000, depending on the tier that you're going. And for a small business owner, like you're probably gawking at that because that's a lot of money when you're getting started. But if you start breaking that down to understand what the value is and interpret it, okay, so I'm spending, let's call it $1,500 for the average ticket, spending $1,500 to go to inbound. I will be at inbound 3 days, so $500 a day. None, and based off of that, you have close one website deal, and that one website deal is worth $5,000. You've already made up your ticket price right then and there. And that's just that one deal. That doesn't include anything else that may come out of the conversation. So that's kind of this idea where you want to start thinking about value-based pricing in a different way. And that's kind of why I said that project-based pricing and value-based pricing are the same bucket for me, because I would argue that value-based pricing is not its own pricing model. It's a theory that you apply to every other pricing model that exists. So cost plus pricing is like what it costs you to get and what you're able to sell it for. If you're incorporating value-based pricing, like you're also looking at things like supply and demand, as well as the level of effort to create something. And so, for example, the retro game industry, cost plus pricing, you're not necessarily going to be able to do that if you're a retro game store trying to sell like a Nintendo 64 or an Atari or a Genesis. You're going to incorporate a value-based pricing system based off of what people want to pay for and are willing to pay for this device, which is
Yeah.
why it cost me $100 a couple weeks ago to get to rebuy my original Game Boy that died several years ago, which I know is more than what the Game Boy was when it first came out.
Right.
And so
And
it's
like the value there, like
yeah.
is you like how much value is it to Bryan Ossa that he now owns a Game Boy again,
Hmm.
right? And all these immeasurable things that we try to, forget about. It just you're leaving a lot on the table. It's like opportunity cost is
Hmm.
another thing, right? Like no matter how cheap or effective, like you can put for cost plus pricing. It's like what if you have to sell that thing, then what, opportunity might you be missing out on if you don't sell the other things? And that's where if there's a huge demand for it, right, you can still serve it without having to, go to like race to the bottom pricing. If you need to like apply black and white math to help you understand, like that's where it's like, okay, I don't really want to sell this thing, but I know I have to support this user base. Um, we either keep it at cost plus pricing and we build in value in other places, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we price it there because we know how impactful it's going to be if they can get it from us, if they can get it from the same place, if we can package it in with other things. This is where I love um, how you shifted gears there. Like value based can be applied to
Everywhere.
all these other strategies, right?
Exactly. Because and that's what I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about, is just like showing how you can incorporate that into these different structures. Like we've already shown what it looks like in cost plus. And so like there's also competition based pricing, there's time based pricing, hourly pricing, project based pricing. The application of the value based is what you're going to prove to your customers in these different pricing strategies. So competition based, very easy. Like you benchmark your costs against your competitors' costs, but also what makes you unique? Why do people want to come to you? Is there something that you're doing that's so drastically different that can provide immense value that justifies a 20% or maybe even a 30% markup against your competitors? That's the perfect implementation of value based that level. Hourly base
Yeah.
is the same thing. Like what we're talking about for that social calendar, if we break that down and we're not looking at that from a social calendar side of things, but we're looking at actual creating a social media content. And you're saying like, look, my hourly rate is $75, but you live maybe in heart of San Francisco. And so your clients are all working in San Francisco as well. And so what you would be like, well, I value myself at 75 an hour, but because of my value and where I live, maybe I can charge 125 an hour. That's a perfect example of how you're able to incorporate an hourly. And the same thing for project-based pricing, because I think, Chris, your example where you mentioned earlier, just doing an onboarding and the first time you do it, you look at it based off of time and maybe it takes you 20 hours to do something. And after 10 times of doing it, you have it down pat and it takes you 7. You don't want to change your pricing on that project just because you do it quicker. That's that's not the point. That defeats the whole purpose. The value is what you're able to deliver and output to those who are seeking that support from you. And so you need to really apply that theory of the value based into all these different models and stop treating it like this whole separate entity that is this mystical fantasy that you can get to uh, or can't get to, because that's just it's gonna get in your way.
Yeah. And this is why I like to shift the conversation towards the experience, of the
Mm-hmm.
product. Because it's very hard to measure, what being easier to buy from looks like, what being easier to be successful with looks like. But like, I literally pay no attention to how much an Amazon Prime membership is costing me. I have no idea when it renews. I
Mm-hmm.
know a few years ago they upped the price, and I was like, oh yeah, probably makes sense because I'm getting a shit ton of value.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I I agree you should raise the price. Like that's like the experience is so good where I have expectations. They're always met. I don't have to worry about a lot of things when I buy stuff from Amazon. It's super easy,
Mm-hmm.
right? If they were to try to, and I'm sure like maybe this is a bad example because they have data up the wazoo to
Yeah.
support all this stuff. But that's the idea, right? Like if you want to charge more, instead of, just kind of putting your finger in the air and testing the wind, it's like, hey, our experience is better than our competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was 2022, you know, uh, there's a study that Jay Baer talks about how like speed and like speed of response and like to the point of convenience is now just as important as price,
Mm-hmm.
right? And represents a massive opportunity, but also a massive transformation that businesses have to go through because when price is the most important thing to a consumer, we can be mid conversation, okay, it's going to cost half as much,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my business might even take a hit, but I can do that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot transition that quickly to responding in 10 seconds
Mm-hmm.
or just having it freely available on the website. That requires systems and process
Mm-hmm.
to support that. But when you know that it's just as important in price and you want to get out of the game of just racing to the bottom on price, you have to accept that's the game that you got to play, to be able to charge more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that actually begs a good question that actually lingers in the back of my head, and I have my answer to it, but I'm curious what yours is. And that's in your opinion, do you correlate value-based pricing, the theory of it, with your project management and operations?
I do now, yeah, because it's got to be like in the same sentence as like experience is the differentiator or the battlefield on which businesses, win or lose now.
Mm-hmm.
That experience, I mean, unless this is where it's like if you want growth and scale, like you have to apply the operations to support that, to support the human connection, the personalization, the personal
Mm-hmm.
experience that you have to provide to win.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where individual consultants, they don't necessarily have to scale and they might hunt for, the 10K, 20K a month contracts,
Mm-hmm.
the coaches that get paid $1,000 an hour. I've heard
Mm-hmm.
of even $10,000 an hour. When you think about the impact they're having, CEOs that are creating companies worth millions, like that's probably one of the best investments that CEO is making,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they will make it all day as long as there's a correlation between the value, provided and the value of the business,
Exactly.
right? So I think it does like, that's where it's important. Always try not to assume what the goal is before they say it. Like if you don't need to scale and grow, then operationalizing all this stuff is much less important. You can get
Mm-hmm.
on the phone. I've seen veteran sales guys do it. They're very good at this. Like you can sell, especially when you're the one consulting, right? It's all about that one-to-one conversation. You don't need any kind of system
Mm-hmm.
in place besides a scratch, piece of paper to help you do that. Uh, but as soon as you try to scale out of that one person, that one value point, that one channel, that's when like it's very hard to do this at scale, without the systems and operations in place.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. And that vision shares the same alignment with my answer because ultimately value-based pricing is one about the value you're able to provide for your customers, but two, more importantly, it's about your ability to do that at scale. And plus one to everything you just mentioned, because the ability to have those operations put into place are is going to be what drives your repeatability to do this for that same customer multiple times, or take something you've done for one customer and apply it to another customer in a very seamless, effective way. And so that's why you see various different, well, maybe not various different, but why you see a somewhat consistent pricing tier for HubSpot onboardings across all kinds of different agencies. And that's because it's been boiled down to a science, and being able to take an understanding of what exactly the portal is that you're implementing and then building that out for you. Yes, the companies that your customers have are going to be different, but the setup experience itself is going to be very similar. However, where this starts getting a little bit different and really starts getting into the nuances of it is when you start talking about business operations and doing like mapping out, for example, a sales experience process where you're looking holistically from when you're trying to understand prospects who've never heard of your company before and you want those people to be closed deals, and you're creating that entire user journey that's the marketing to sales handoff and building up every step along the way, whether that's your lead scoring down to your sales pipelines or even your playbooks and templates. You need to be able to demonstrate that value to the customer so that you can put that into play. And that theory of it, that's that repeatability aspect, because you can look at and understand, okay, well, I know how to be thinking about each one of these different categories, but they're going to be different for each different client. And so that's where that value really shines through.
Yeah, you've got to. This is the challenge, and ultimately why businesses don't necessarily go this route. Is it's definitely a more challenging sale, and the less that you can get people to feel the value without you being there in the conversation, the more important those conversations are, the less it's going to scale. The more pressure and mental load on your sales team, on your marketing team, on your service teams, that when they know that they're always having to explain these points is like, and remind people this is where the value is, or feel like they gotta, they can't miss a step ever, right? These are the kinds of things that as you add more people into the process, more customers and, new team members,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it doesn't scale, like flat out, right? And I look forward to learning more and getting more educated on the concept of the revenue factory and what winning by design is doing, because I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
path towards standardization here. Because at the end of the day, this is not dissimilar from, okay, you've prototyped a product, now you've got to make 1,000 of them. It's not going to be the same process as you made the one, right? And that's where, if we can think about these conversations and relationships in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like a product, then it's an experience. Experience is the product. That experience that we're manufacturing and managing and maintaining, we've been able to do it with 10 customers.
Mm-hmm.
Now we got to do it with 100. Now we got to do it with 1,000, right?
Exactly.
Or now we got
And
to do it with those same 10 customers with this other brand new product that we want them to start using, right?
yeah, and that actionable next step in taking these ideas and these theories into practice is exactly what we're going to be covering when I get back from holiday. So be sure to come back in early October, because we're going to be talking about how we're able to take this and actually build out models within HubSpot using the tools that they have that will allow you to really operationalize your experience doing sales and your client's experience just being able to, you know, buy and work with.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So while we look ahead to that,
Mm-hmm.
you think about how your team, manages pricing and cost and just moves through the sales process. I'll be doing a session with Max Cohen later this week about Quote
Mm-hmm.
Happily. That's one of the many tools that can help with things like this, helping guide the team on how to deliver value throughout each point of the process, making
Mm-hmm.
it easier for them. Like you're also delivering value to your team so that they can return the favor to the customers. But yeah, as you think about your process, think about your pricing, your different products. Let's continue to find the opportunity and let's grow. Have a great week, everybody.
Take care all.